So we'll go ahead and get started. We may have others join us, but I want to welcome everybody to today's workshop. This is a workshop that we put together just to help students to better understand how to build mentoring relationships with their professors and how to attend office hours and make that a non-traumatic experience. We understand that it can be really scary to try to approach people that that you're wanting to build relationships with, and it can feel forced at times too. But it's a very, very important thing for you all to do. And if you remember, in the fall semester, we administered an undergraduate survey, kind of a needs assessment, if you will, looking at what were some of the topics and issues that you all cared about. We've already had a couple workshops this semester dealing with and addressing some of those needs. But this seminar in particular, I think, is really important. Only about a quarter to 30% of our students in EPS report that they have close relationships with at least 3 of their professors. And I know too, as a first generation and a transfer student from at the university that I ultimately graduated from, I remember feeling very, very behind when I came in and just unsure how to navigate this. So I'm very grateful to the panel that's joining me today. And without any further ado, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dr. Denise Paquette Boots. I'm your Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education here in the School of EPS, and I'm also a Professor of Public Policy. And then I'd like my colleagues to go ahead and introduce yourselves as well. We have a distinguished panel today. Go ahead, Dr. Scotch, why don't you start?
I'm Richard Scotch. I teach in sociology and in the Graduate Public Policy and Political Economy program. And I've been at UTD a very long time.
He has. He's also our program head in both criminology and sociology. He's very involved in the faculty senate. Dr. Scotch is in a lot of different spaces and places at UTD. And I think I'm very safe in saying he's one of our most respected faculty leaders on campus. So we're very grateful to have him on the panel. Dr. Saberwal, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And you're muted.
We are still learning. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Boots. My name is Meghna Sabarwal, and I'm the department or the program head in the Public and Nonprofit Management program. I'm also a professor. I teach in the Public and Nonprofit Management program, mostly graduate classes. I see a lot of my students here, so shout out to all of you for being here. I've been at UTD now. This is my 13th year. It's been fantastic working with several students throughout this journey. So I'm looking forward to this wonderful panel. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Kim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is Do-Young Kim. I'm Associate Dean of Graduate Education. And also I'm a professor of public policy, political economy, and also affiliated with the GIS. And also I'm the director of the social data analysis and research program. And this is my, I think, 10th year at UTD, and I'm happy to be part of this panel.
Love it. And I'm in my 16th year, which I kind of can't believe. And so time goes fast. So we have a great panel today. I thought to start out, I want to leave a lot of time for questions for students that may be on the call. But we each have some nuggets of wisdom, I think, that we're going to share kind of to start out about these different, and they're all different areas, different topics about building relationships, going to office hours, asking for letters of recommendation, but they all tie together. They're one big ball of wax in a sense. So why don't we kind of do a round table? We'll kind of go around the table, offer some words of wisdom on any or all of those topics, and then we'll open the floor up to questions. Dr. Scotch, you have to leave a little bit early today, so why don't you go ahead and go first?
Okay, thanks, Denise. Dr. Boots. Many of you will be familiar with the concept of imposter syndrome, but let me just start with that because it affected me when I went to graduate school. I had done very well as an undergraduate, but there I was as a first-year graduate student feeling like they had let me in by mistake because I didn't know all the kind of unknown things, unsaid things, the so-called hidden curriculum that was there in my graduate program. And it was very hard for me to figure that out, and it took me a year, and I had to grapple with this feeling that they had let me in by mistake. But fortunately, I had some very good peers and some good professors, and I got over it and fit in and ultimately finished. But I think it's hard in sociology. We talk about adult socialization, how people become aware of what the expectations are in new places as they go from adolescence to adulthood, from high school to college, starting a new job, moving to a new town. And so it's important for us to be aware that if we don't fit in or don't know what to do, that knowledge is available to us. So I would say one of the things we're here to talk more about relationships with faculty, but I would just start by saying it's important to develop relationships with one's peers, with other students. Some of them may have a lot more experience and they can pass on useful ideas, some of the knowledge that they've developed. Some of them will be just as terrified or as nervous. Many of you aren't terrified, but maybe a little nervous. And so those other students can really be sources of information, sources of support, and you can watch them. They can also be role models for you. So before I get to the advice section, I don't know that I have any real unique advice, and my colleagues will probably do much better with that. But let me just speak as someone who, because I'm on admissions committees and I review things for some scholarship programs, I look at a lot of letters of recommendation. And students who get A's in big classes and ask the professor for a recommendation who can say, oh yes, Jane Jones was in my class and she got a 98 and she showed up all the time and she sat in the front, so please admit her. That's good information to have, but it's not really what we're looking for in letters of recommendation. So I'll consider Jane, but I might consider John Jones, who sits maybe a little further back. But when the letter says, yes, John did this really interesting project, and John and I have had several conversations about his interests, and I know he really wants to go to your program, and I think he would be really good there because I think his interests match up with the people there, and he's a really good writer. I think he needs a little more practice in public speaking, but I'm sure with your excellent program, he will get that. So that's the kind of letter, even though John doesn't have as high a grade as Jane, could have reversed the genders, I suppose. But the second student, it's a much more persuasive letter because I really know something about that person and how well they are likely to succeed. Just getting an A in a class doesn't tell you all that much, or where they are in the seating chart. So I think it's really important for letters of recommendation for graduate school, for letters of recommendation for jobs, for faculty to really know students. And it's hard. It's hard when you're in a class of 70 people and you're the only one who really knows you is you. So how do you get the faculty member to know you? Well, one of the ways of doing that is to introduce yourself, is to tell them something about yourself. Another is to find out something about the faculty member by looking at, we all have all this profile information online. I'm sure my colleagues will talk about office hours and how those can be used. But I think just trying to connect to people as humans instead of just as the student in row 3 or the faculty up at the front of the room, you have to get beyond that in order to effectively navigate. In sociology, we call this cultural capital. It's a form of knowledge that can lead to success, but it's something that doesn't just happen on its own. And I think particularly if you come from a family where your parents did not go to college, where your older siblings did not go to college, or they went to a school where nobody ever talked to anybody, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed. So I encourage you to learn from your peers, to connect to the faculty, to get to know the faculty as well as having them get to know you. I think I'll just stop there and let my colleagues continue, but I'll be glad to answer questions and we'll stick around almost to the end of the session today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very, very helpful advice. Dr. Sabharwal.
Thank you, Dr. Boots, and thank you, Dr. Scotch. Very, very good advice indeed. And sometimes you have to hear things 3 times. So if I'm repeating something, I think it's good because Dr. Scotch has already mentioned it, and we need reinforcement. But I will say this: that COVID has certainly not made it easy on any one of us who have started in the program, who are graduating without being in a class in person. So you have to build this relationship and navigate in an online setting, which certainly is not easy. But at the same time, I would say that all our faculty here are willing to help. They are fantastic. They are your champions. They want to be your sponsors. They even want to be your lifelong mentors. But for that, you have to make some effort, right? It takes two to tango. And so you have to be proactive in your efforts as well. Now, I'm an international student. I came to this country 22 years ago to get my master's and then went on to get my PhD and postdoc. But when I first came, I come from India, and the culture in many Asian settings is you don't often go to professors and build that kind of a relationship. You only go there if you're in trouble, or if you have to collect your grade, or something very related to the class itself. But that relationship building is foreign. When I came here, it was foreign to me as an aspect. And so as time progressed, I understood how important it was to build that kind of a network and a relationship with faculty, because they don't just help you with, of course, recommendation letters, which are very, very important, but they also help in enhancing your learning, for instance, right? When I have a student who comes to me in my class or after class or connects with me and tells me about their interests, I'm constantly thinking like, oh, I remember so and so told me they're interested in issues of diversity and inclusion. So if I see a research article, if I see something comes out, I instantly think about them. I make that connection, and then it has to be repeated, right? If you told me just once, maybe it's hard, but if we are having those repeated, so the key is repeated conversations, ongoing conversations. So if we have that, I'll remember you and say, okay, I remember so and so said that. Or if I have somebody tell me, Dr. Sabarwal, I'm really interested in a career in HR, in the public sector, do you know someone? Do you have contacts? And we have a lot of contacts with cities around, with nonprofits around, and we have students who've gone through the program. They'll send us oftentimes job ads. So I'll remember you specifically if we've had those conversations. So I'll connect you and say, hey, I saw this job. Somebody contacted me. Would you be interested? I'm happy to make that personal connection. So we'll make that personal connection for you if we know you are interested in, say, HR or compensation or any of those specific areas. So we've done that in the past, and that led to successful jobs as well. So I think that's very, very important, is it makes that connection for your careers as well. Another thing is, faculty nominate students for their awards, for academic societies. I nominate students all the time. And if I have that kind of a relationship with the student, I know what they're doing, I know what they want. I'll even nominate them for awards. I'll nominate them to some prestigious academic societies. I'll tell them, things that they may not be aware of. So I think that's another reason for you all to think about, why. So yes, it's important to connect and build these relationships, but I'm even going back to a fundamental question, is why should we build these relationships, correct? Sometimes professors will recognize talent in a student. That's some, like Dr. Scott said, you may have imposter syndrome, but faculty see something in you when you are in their class or you're interacting with them. If you build that relationship, they may see and advise certain things in terms of your career, how to navigate. All faculty, I think I can speak for all of us here in EPS, are so well connected in our own networks outside UTD, for instance, right? We are part of associations, we chair associations, we are part of conferences. So when we are part of that, that means we know people in different graduate programs too. I've made those connections for a lot of my students who've said, Dr. Sabarwal, I'm interested to pursue, say, a graduate degree, but I want to be in, say, Seattle or Portland area. Can you help? Do you know someone? And, instantly you think of people and you make that connection. It truly helps them to even get into a graduate program. So those are things that one should think about, especially when you're thinking about why it's important to build that relationship. Now, how do you build that relationship? I'll speak very briefly, and then I'll let my colleague Professor Doyon speak too. How do you build that rapport? How do you build that kind of a, what is rapport, what is this bond that you're building? It is really based on mutual trust. And how do you build trust? You build trust after repeated conversations and a willingness to embrace different perspectives. So I think you have to have an open mind. Dr. Scott said, find out about faculty, what their research interests are, what their teaching interests are. Send them an email, introduce yourself, not just say, I want to meet. Why would you like to meet? Be a little more specific. I saw X you had published recently, or I'm really interested in this, or can we talk about that? Faculty are busy. Contrary to what most people think, we just don't teach. We do a lot of research, we do service inside campus, outside. We are connected with a lot of associations. So faculty are certainly very busy, but they're very helpful too if you reach out in the right way. So be mindful of and be respectful of the time. Nowadays, faculty have online office hours with all, we are all teams. And so offer that as an option. Even faculty may offer that. I'm willing to meet on Teams. Actually, it saves time for me to drive to campus. We can as easily talk on Teams then and probably meeting. And now we're meeting in person too. So that's definitely a possibility. So don't wait till the graduating semester. This is my last point, and I cannot emphasize it enough, is don't wait till you're graduating, because now you'll be on the job market or applying to graduate programs, and then frantically contact a professor. I've had that. I write about 2 to 3 at least letters every month. And somebody contacted me recently. Of course, I want to help the student. I will write a letter, but there's going to be a difference between somebody I've established a relation versus someone who took a class with me 3 years ago. I had to go back to that person's records and see, okay, what was the grade? And just like Dr. Scott said, that letter shows when you are there. I'm not going to be able to speak in a personal tone about you as a student if I've not established that relationship. So yes, don't wait till the very end. Work on it. So I'll stop there and let Dr. Doyong add more to it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's always good to be the last, because I can simply find out something is not covered. I think the Dr. Scotch and Sabra already mentioned, I think, almost everything. I just want to probably emphasize or maybe mention about the maybe a couple more things. So since Dr. Sabra already mentioned about the cultural barriers, and I think the in terms of the cultural kind of the hesitancy to reach out to faculty or somebody who they don't know, probably the largest among East Asian students. As a East Asian students, we always were not really sort of the actively participating in that kind of conversation or reaching out to the faculty. But aside from the cultural barriers, I think the one of the reason why the students were hesitant to contact the faculty is probably because of the very general or conventional assumption that the faculty is too busy or our faculty professors are so busy. But that's actually true, but this actually matter of the priority, because when like about 25 years ago, when I thinking about maybe there's a faculty member who I want to work with or maybe ask about recommendation letter, then I always think that, oh, he or she may be too busy, and then maybe I may be the least priority, but that's not really true. As a faculty member for maybe almost 15 years, and then also as an administrator, the faculty, I think the most important responsibility and also passion as a faculty member and also the administrator is to help and assist with the students. So if the students understand that sort of the faculty's sort of main responsibility or main passion, main sort of enthusiasm is all about helping the students, then maybe students may be less hesitant to reach out to them. Of course, some faculty may say, "Oh, I'm kind of currently too busy and probably get back to me later," but that's his problem, it's not problem. So just keep maybe try to change your mindset, and you have a right to ask assistance or supervision or support from the faculty member. That's, I think, something that you keep in mind. And but also you need to appreciate the faculty's time as well. So you need to do your homework. So first, as already mentioned, these days you can easily find out the information about what they're currently doing, what kind of work they do, so then maybe study about their current research, current activities, and then find out what I can provide to him or her. So given your sort of the skill sets or maybe some kind of the common interest, then maybe you can much easy to get their attention. Then once you see the common interest or common mutual benefits, and then that I think that kind of relationship can be easily built up. And then lastly, I want you to set up a more like a tangible goals in maybe certain time frame. So that's actually what I did when I need some letter of recommendation for my tenure or maybe some kind of the application. So I always prepare the list of the faculty who I want to build a relationship on what specific aspects. So the faculty A, B, C potential letter writer for me, and maybe E, F, G is potential co-author of my paper or something. Then and also along with the timeline. So I'm supposed to contact with this person by maybe end of February, end of March, and then also what kind of the tangible goal that I want to achieve with him or her. Maybe it could be a paper, it could be just letter of recommendation, or maybe some kind of joint projects. So I think instead of the having just rough idea about I need some kind of the interaction with the faculty, but you need to have a very specific goal. Otherwise, 2 year or 4 year may fly by very quickly. Thank you.
So really helpful. Thank you, Dr. Kim. So just to kind of put my 2 cents in and to add to the wisdom of my 3 colleagues who covered a lot of different things that are really, really important. So in my experience, I get a lot of email requests from students that go like along these lines. Hi, Dr. Boots. I know it's been a long time since I've talked to you. You were my favorite professor ever. I am now in my senior year and I'm getting ready to apply for law school or graduate school. I would be honored if you would write me a letter of recommendation. And my response to that student is, thank you so much for thinking about me. I do remember you. It's been a long time since we've talked. I'm so happy to hear that you're moving forward with your future plans. Unfortunately, a letter of recommendation is not about the grade in your class. That comes from your transcript, right? A letter of recommendation is about my personal relationship with you and your journey that has led you to this next step. And I am unable to write that letter, unfortunately. I am hoping that you have other professors that you've built that relationship with. And that is always a painful email. All of us on this call have written that exact same email to students, wishing them well and telling them that we can't serve that role moving forward. I also occasionally get very gendered feeling emails where students reach out to me and assume because of my title, because of my role in the school, or because they've known me in some other capacity, that I'll be willing to write them a letter because of that. Just remember that when you have just personal relationship with a professor where you've had a problem and maybe they've helped you, that is all that professor could write about. And so none of us ever want to do any harm to a student. And so we would never be able to talk about how we maybe helped you in some capacity, or maybe referred you for services. We would never want to talk about that. So when you email a professor, just a couple friendly reminders. We have a lot of grad students that teach, and it can be confusing sometimes, but always assume that that whoever you're emailing, if you're not sure, you need to address them by either professor or doctor. And that is very important. You're in a very hierarchical place. The university is very hierarchical, but never address someone by a first name. This happens every week to me on an email from a student. And it's a very awkward position to correct students, but it's also a mentoring moment. And so when I gently nudge students and say, moving forward, kindly refer to me as Dr. Boots, you should take cues from how professors refer to themselves in class. They may even directly address that. And it's not an insult to someone to be called doctor. If they're not a doctor, they'll correct you and say, please call me Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so, or call me by my first name. But that goes for staff as well. Address them by Mr. or Mrs. And some of our staff, even some of our advising team, one of our undergrad advisors has a doctorate from UTD, and that's Dr. Hicks. And so don't come off as entitled in your email. So no text messaging, please use punctuation, grammar, proper spelling, and remember, especially if you're asking for something, you are representing your competency level. And it's also an impression about how serious that request is for you. And so that is very important. You put your best foot forward. You always have salutation, dear so-and-so. State clearly what you need. It's not going to be lowercase, all lowercase letters with no punctuation. And you're going to sign your name off and thank them, right, for considering that. So foot forward. And I say this with affection. I'm a first-gen student, and I did not always understand how to communicate with my professors when I started school. And it's very intimidating. I get called Miss Boots all the time. Miss Boots is my former mother-in-law. I love her. She's a wonderful woman, but I am not Miss Boots. And I don't go by that name in any part of my life. And so it's awkward when you get called by a first name or a name that you don't go by. That then becomes part of the conversation. So that's just a friendly, gentle nudge. Please be very professional in all your communications at the university and beyond. Your boss will also thank you for this. Go to office hours. Know that your professors want to meet you. That's why we have office hours. If you have a bad experience with one professor, that doesn't mean you write off all professors for office hours. That's the other thing I'm going to say. And you need to remember too that your professors are also human beings with families and other things. And so a lot of students think of us like teaching is the number one thing we do. And for I can speak for all 4 of us on this call. Teaching is very, very important to everyone that's on this call. That's why we're here. But teaching doesn't just happen in the classroom. Some of the most important conversations you're ever going to have, speaking from personal experience with my mentors, happened across a desk from them or on a Teams call. And I still Teams, and Zoom my mentors. They never really stop. If they're truly your mentors for life, they are forever. I probably have 800 or 900 former students that keep in touch with me. They'll send me an occasional email. The best thing about being a professor, your students are adults, so when they leave us, you're no longer just my student. Sometimes you become friends with your professors, but you also can't expect that. And you have to respect boundaries that professors put, sometimes for very good reasons. And one thing I will tell you, your professor should never be your friend when you're a student. Your professor should be your professor. You can be friendly with your professor. You certainly can have affection for them and they for you, but there should be professional boundaries. And that is very important for your professional development. And so that you always know too that those boundaries are healthy. So I'm just going to say that too, that boundaries are good for the student as well as the professor. The rule of thumb for me when a student asks for a letter of recommendation is that unless there's an exigent circumstance, I usually want to know you at least a year. I want to be able to say that I've known you at least a year. I always say how long I've known a student in a letter of recommendation. So think about it not from your perspective, but from the letter reader's perspective. How much value is there, like Dr. Scotch said, about a letter about you coming to class? It literally has no value. In fact, it hurts you on a letter of recommendation. And Aurora, I see your question, and I will absolutely address that in a second. But be prepared when you go to ask them for that letter. For example, there's a list of items I typically ask my students. And so the first thing I ask them to have is a current resume with their GPA, their major, and any minors or double major, a list of all of their scholarships, leadership, awards, languages that they're proficient in, any special skill sets that they have, a typical professional resume, extracurricular activities. All of these things are things that we look to and we point at when we're talking about your ability to succeed in this next chapter. And these are things that you have accomplished as an undergrad that set you apart from your peers. What is never in a resume that is just as valuable and sometimes even more so when we compare apples to apples is a paragraph or two that you tell me what makes you different. What adversity have you seen in your life that you have overcome that you are healthy and comfortable sharing? What diversity do you have in your background? If you come from an immigrant family, for example, what was that journey to the United States and you getting an education and joining an R1 university and being a student here? Maybe you haven't had time to tell your professor all those things, but that is invaluable in a letter of recommendation because it humanizes you to the people reading that letter. And so resume, list of classes taken with semesters and grades that you took that class with that professor or classes, because trust me, it all runs together like a ball of wax. I can't even imagine Dr. Scotch with the years and all the students that he's seen. At some point, it's like, I cannot remember which semester it was that I had you. Once you tell us, sometimes things will click for us. So paragraph on the life goals, like why this goal? Why are you applying for these grad programs? Why this degree program? What's the pathway and what are you seeing in your future? And know too that you don't have to have the answers to everything. If you want to go to law school, but you don't know exactly what kind of law you want to do because you're interested in maybe 3, that is okay. That's part of the journey. But tell us something about where your passion, where is your drive for this next chapter? Where is it pulling you? Where is your heart calling you to go to? And that we want to make sure that our letter also reflects your mission, your own letter of intent. and the other information you might be submitting in your package. You can do this in bullets, which is really easy for your letter writer, where you could list major accomplishments, awards, diversity issues, achievements that you've had, or things that really make you stand out. And then also a list of due dates. So I can't tell you how many students have asked me for, I need a letter from you. And it ended up being 22 letters that they wanted. And they never talked about that. So that is a different ask of your letter writer than one letter to LSAC or 5 letters to graduate programs. You need to be upfront and understand it is not a cut and paste for every single letter. And we need the name of the program director or admissions board, how that letter needs to be addressed, the due date for when that letter is due, and an address for that university. And you need to communicate whether that needs to be mailed or a secure link will be sent to the professor. But don't make us chase you down. And this is why some professors say no to letters of recommendation, because the simple ask becomes 25 emails back and forth. Everything that I just gave you on that list is one email, everything in it. Please don't send 12 and expect your letter writers to go through 12 emails and try to find all the nuggets of information that you should have organized in one. So that is one of my best bits of advice. And you should assume a 1-month notice for your professors with some sensitivity to holidays and breaks, that we also need downtime. If there's one big negative, I think, for COVID, it's that because we do so much on Teams and because the lines have further blurred about what the workday looks like, and us trying to accommodate students that have really been pushed, students don't always respect those boundaries back. And so to ask for a 7 p.m. meeting when somebody has kids and that's their dinner time, that's a big request. To ask for someone to have a letter done for you in 5 days is probably not going to happen. And it's not because they don't care about you, it's because you didn't plan well and their schedule does not allow it. So sometimes there's tough love in these conversations. That's a mentoring moment. Either you can bristle up from it or you can grow from it and you can become more professional and more professionalized. But if a professor cares enough to say hard things, it's because they're vested in you. And so you have to take that and hopefully make something positive of it. So those are my nuggets of wisdom. Let me address Aurora's question. Am I saying we can't be friends with our professors? As a student, I find I have a ton in common with professors. We hit it off well, and our relationship can grow into more than a professional relationship. So Aurora, my personal view on this is that you cannot be truly friends with a professor when they are actively teaching and mentoring you and you are a student in their program. So if you're an undergraduate student, you can be friendly with professors. You can go to coffee with them. You can go have lunch with them, go see them for office hours, but there needs to be boundaries. And those boundaries are there to protect you as well. I become friends with students after they graduate from my programs, but our relationship is building the whole time they're in my program. And particularly for undergrads that talk, that go through my master's and into PhDs, I think that, it's a very special relationship. And I have that with my major professor. I started with him as an undergrad, and John Cochran is still my mentor. And I called him a few weeks ago to talk about something and seek his advice. But those boundaries are there to protect you as well as your professor. And think about the perception for other students as well, that you might be getting preferential treatment, that's unethical. That does not help you in having a good reputation of competency, or that your grade actually represents your hard work. And so, yes, I do believe that. I'll let my colleagues weigh in on that as well.
I just wanted to go back to that comment on 25 letters, and then we can address the one Aurora asked. In cases like that, the best thing I've found is when I've written those repeated letters by changing the title or changing the program, is students create an Excel file for me, and it's sorted by the deadline that's coming up. And with all of that information, what's the website, what's the deadline, will they send me a link, or do I have to send it to somebody? And if I have to, what's their email? So that really helps get me organized, helps get them organized. And once it's done, we'll check it off and say, okay, these are done and these are left. So the Excel file's been very useful. So I just wanted to add to what Dr. Boots was saying. And in terms of Aurora's question, I think everybody's got a different personality. As a personality, I think knowing myself, I'm a friendly person. I didn't go to undergraduate here, and I feel that human relationship is very important, which I didn't have as a student, as an undergraduate student back home. And so I value that much more. And if somebody wants to build that relationship, I'm available for them. I do work on that. I've had best of relationship with students who've graduated or currently in the program. I feel it humanizes it a little bit more. I feel, in fact, I'm able to work better with them. I work on research with them. But yes, there are some boundaries. I've also had students, to be very honest, who I have been friendly with, and they've taken advantage. And because I've shared my number with them, they have WhatsApped me on times that are not acceptable, or even about things that are not acceptable, almost asking me what I should be doing, or not asking but telling me what I should be doing. So things like that have happened. And so that's where you feel like, okay, I trusted you, I want to build this relationship with you, but don't take advantage of this, still be respectful. And so I would expect that. So that's where I'll stop and see what others have to say.
Yeah, good advice. So I think those were all good questions. Anybody want to add in there on anything? And does anybody want to raise a hand and speak or ask a question? We definitely welcome that. Don't be afraid. This is good practice for talking during office hours. And Ahmed said, I think starting with emails, then have Zoom or team meetings help. Yep. Then meetings at an office as well in the events of interest will also help. Yes. Providing the information to professor about the contents needed to emphasize. And yes, you must do that to have the best letter of recommendation. It's having those details. They really do help.
And may I add to that recommendation letter part again, because I've written so many, this happened with me with some of my PhD students. I'll write the letter and I'll always share it with them just to make sure things are factually right. I've had students who've gone and changed things up that it's not a reflection of what I want to say about them necessarily. I've of course put good things, but they have taken it to the next level. And I wasn't comfortable putting that information in there. So I'll tell them, look, this is what I think is accurate and a good representation. But if you're not comfortable, then maybe you must ask somebody else, because I am not going to take what you wrote, which was sometimes not even factually right, and they wanted to elevate it to a different level, which was inaccurate in many ways. So then that's a reflection on me, and I would not feel ethically right to do that.
Yeah. So that's one thing to remember, right, is that when a professor writes a letter of recommendation, it's our reputation and it's our social capital sometimes that we're using to support them. And so it needs to be what we truly feel. And I'm like you, Dr. Sabharwal, I tend to actually share my letters of recommendation with my students, sometimes because I think they need to know that's what I think of them. And it's just for them, because typically students waive their right to look at letters, and I would encourage you all to do that. Click that box. You may have a professor that shares it with you, but you should not ask them to share it with you. If you've clicked that box, sometimes I do that because I have a student who really, it's been a long journey and there's self-doubt, and I need them to know, like, I do believe in you and I believe you're going to be successful. And I think there's a lot of power in that affirmation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't wish to dominate this discussion, but I had one other thing with especially students who are applying for government jobs. Those who are applying for government jobs, federal, state, local, their recommendations, in the sense reference checks, are very detailed. For those of us who've done FBI checks or federal government checks, right, you can attest to it. They go into so many more details. If I don't know the person closely, probably you wouldn't be able to answer most of it. So again, being mindful of what kind of job also you are thinking in that future, because a lot of that recommendation, those are very detailed. I'll stop there.
That's very good. Yes, that's very true. Like they're going to ask about your family. They're going to ask about how you handle debt. They're going to ask about if you've ever talked about civil unrest. They're going to ask about all of those things. They're granting you a security clearance. They want to know everything you don't put on a resume. That's really what a background check is. And I'm a former federal agent, so I went through, a lot of those. They went back to elementary school when I first became a federal agent, going back to talk to principals and things like that were there to see if I was a problem kid. So it's amazing where they try to go on those kind of things. That's really good advice. Dr. Scotch, I know you have to leave very shortly. Is there any kind of final words of wisdom that you want to share or anything?
No, I think most of what I had to say has been covered already. I do think it's an opportunity for students to figure out why what we're studying is interesting. All of us on the faculty got into this not because we wanted a high-paying job with the state of Texas, or we like following all the rules, but because we really love working with students. We really love understanding and studying and researching the topics that we cover. And I think if you can appreciate why we are doing this and get to know us in that way, and not just as someone who dispenses grades or as a gatekeeper to some position you want, that can be the basis for a relationship. So I'll just close with that, and I know Dr. Kim has his hand up, so I'll say goodbye to everyone and thank you for
Thanks,
the
Dr.
opportunity.
Thank you. Dr. Kim.
Yeah, just speaking of the government job, I just want to sort of inform you that we have a government job workshop tomorrow at noon for, of course, the grad students, but the undergrad students also are welcome to join that session. So we do have a great panelist and to share how to prepare for the government jobs and what kind of the sort of expectation they have for different the both federal and local government job market. So please join the event tomorrow as well. And then in terms of the faculty's perspective on the personal relationship, letter writing style, even the working style, I think it all depends on the different faculty. So you cannot really generalize sort of the every different faculty, because faculty has different culture and also different background, different experiences. So I think in your first meeting you can simply ask about, also you can also kind of figure out what kind of style they have in terms of work and relationships. So it's better to know. The more you know, then the probably the better you can build a relationship between you and faculty.
Really, really good advice. Any questions that you all have? Please do not be shy. There's no stupid question. There's nothing silly to ask. Like, we really want this to be a safe space where you feel like you can ask anything. Does everybody feel confident about how you approach office hours? Look up their Vita. You can look at their research. You could pull up some of the articles, even if you don't understand the whole article. Look at their areas of research. There's usually a reason you're wanting to go to build a relationship with a professor. And many times it's that you're interested in the same things they're interested in. or you look at them as a role model, like that's somebody I want to emulate. So look at their journey. Like that's a great thing, and say, you could ask general questions and then just listen and let them talk. You could ask questions like, so when you look back on your career, what were maybe some of the pivotal moments that led you to this path to become a professor? Like that's a great question to ask somebody. What's the what have been the biggest challenges for you along the road? Like I'm thinking about graduate school. What are the things that I need to be aware of? Maybe what are the differences now that you see with grad school from when you went to grad school? Technology is so different. I remember when I was in grad school, it was paper journals, like in big bound volumes. And I threw my back out carrying stacks of books. And I remember being really hesitant when things went digital. I'm dating myself here, but I still to some extent am like a paper writer. When I write, I love to have paper copies. I have a really hard time, and probably some of that is just my socialization of how I became a scholar. And so I talk a lot to my students when they ask me those questions about, like, are you getting in the databases and the journals? And let me show you Web of Science, and let me show you some of these other really great journals and databases that you could be playing in now. And in your free time, start reading about topics you're interested in. And what are the top journals in your field? What is SSCI, and how do we rank journals? Talk to them about their publications, talk to them about research opportunities, volunteer to work with them on a project. If they have an opening, like make yourself, if you're interested in doing that. But those are great things that you can kind of dip your toes into office hours on. What are your current research projects or publications you're working on? Like that'll just get things flowing.
Yeah, I'll add to that. I had students undergraduate are probably aware of the undergraduate poster competition that's run every year. And so several times I've just let that students know I'm working on something X. Are you interested? I in fact had 2 undergraduates who showed interest. One actually stayed on for the longer time, and then we presented this poster, but we didn't just stop there, right? Then that was an opportunity for that student to go present at her very first academic conference. Then that happened. And with that, we kept working, and we published that piece finally with her name on it as an undergraduate student, which later on won the Best Paper Award for one of our sections at ASPA. So, I mean, these things can lead to many other things. So just sometimes it's a matter of expressing your interest. If a faculty comes up with an opportunity, if it matches your interest, that is a great way to work on research. And I just wanted to add that there.
Definitely. Also, honors theses are a great way to work with a professor kind of one-on-one. So if you're an honors student, I've had a bunch of students over the years that I've done honors theses with, and those are wonderful because you get kind of one-on-one mentoring on that research project. And again, if you do something rigorous and more than just like a basic lit review, there's an opportunity many times, and sometimes on a lit review, but it's a little harder to get just a lit review done. But it depends what you're looking at. That can be a publication opportunity possibly with your mentor, but think of that as an opportunity to also grow your relationship with your mentor. And you should, again, be approaching them well in advance. And know that this is part of the challenge, I think. Professors that are kind of loved by students, lots of students tend to love them. And so that is a great thing, and it's a hard thing, because at some point everyone has kind of a, I can't take any more. Like your plate is full, so to speak, because as a professor, if you take too many students on, you can't dedicate enough time to any of them to make that meaningful. So don't sit back to the last second. Don't be a procrastinator and assume that your favorite professor is always going to have time for a last minute jump in. That would be one thing I encourage you is, remember we said, build those relationships. If you really do connect with someone, you have to have courage and try to reach out and just start those conversations. They'll get easier and easier. And you do become friends with your professor in the process. If you're lucky, I mean, I think it's like the greatest reward of being a professor, right? Is I have students I taught 20 years ago when I was a grad student. I've seen them get married, have babies. Some of them have become professors themselves, and are now hooding students. And just watching that journey is absolutely the best reward in the world. So very, very meaningful. So closing thoughts, colleagues, anything that you want to kind of say before we leave today? You're still muted, Meghna.
I'm not able to get Teams to unmute. Is it unmuted now? Okay. Um, just everything else Dr. Boots and Dr. Kim and Dr. Scott said, I hope with all of this, it doesn't have to be a scary experience. It doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. It doesn't have to be an intimidating experience. You really can approach all of us. We are very amenable, very approachable. It's just that you make sure you do it, introduce yourself, take that first step, and then take it from there. So look forward to more conversations.
And also, I just want you to know that the apps has a lot of new faculty and new and young and
Yes.
fresh with a fresh mind. Although that doesn't mean that we are now really old mind, but anyway, we have lots of the new faces in the building. So feel free to reach out to them because they're also looking for students. And also, I also look forward to seeing you in my office, all teams.
Yeah. And so this panel came together by purpose. And so you have both of your associate deans and two of your program heads in this call. And part of that is by design. Part of my message, I send our undergrads a lot of emails about professionalization issues, and I take that very seriously. I always try to tell you all the things that I wish someone had told me when I was an undergrad. And that's something you never really forget if you love to mentor and you love to teach. You remember your firsts and how scary they were for you. And so kindness goes a long way. Your best faculty are humble, they are kind, they are approachable, and we do what we do because we love our students. And so I hope you always feel that engagement and that investment from your leadership team in EPS, because we truly do want you all to be successful. And sometimes that means saying hard things, but that is because we want you to be successful, not just at UTD, but as you leave us. And you're the legacy for our program. So we're really grateful. And I do see a hand up. Adila, go ahead. Hi, Adila. I think you're muted if you're trying to chat. Adila, can you hear me? I'm going to allow your mic. Let me see if that will open that up. Can you talk now?
Yeah, Teams has been really weird today.
And Friday.
Friday too.
Okay, hi. So I think I was able to get in. Just a quick question, and it's kind of, I guess, a difficult question, but I wanted to know, have you been in a situation where you don't see eye to eye with a student, yet they have their own perspective, whether being research or something else, and how do you handle something like that? Maybe you didn't look at certain issue in that light. How do you deal with that?
I'll address it real quick and then I'll open it. So there's a fit issue, right? So there can be sometimes similar interests, but maybe sometimes too, I think students misunderstand. They think if you do work like I do work, for example, on family violence, so they think I am an expert on all forms of family violence. And maybe they want to do a form of research that just is really hard to do. I'll give you an example. Like I'm a parasite researcher, kids who kill their parents. it is very difficult to get data on parasite. Number one, it's a very, very super rare event. There's only 300 a year in the United States, but there's no database on parasites. So I'll have a student, and I've had students actually email me or come to office hours and say, so I'd like you to give me your data on parasite because I'm ready to do research on that. And that is not something that should be said to a professor. And so again, that becomes a mentoring moment, Adela. So at that point I said, let me explain to you the way research relationships are built. And it's not you make a request like that. And so it may be that they want to do, as I tell students, sometimes they want to research questions that can be asked, but the question is, should they be asked? So I've also had students wanting to do research on human subjects. They have no understanding of IRB protections on human subjects. And I've explained to them gently, like, you need to go get your certification on human subjects and protections on human subjects, and then rethink your research question and come back and talk to me again. So I'm never disrespectful to a student. I always assume goodness in a student. I have had entitlement issues occasionally with students, and that is an opportunity. But being rude to a student is certainly not going to help them to become better. And so I can be firm, I can be direct, I can try to help them the right path, but I would never insult a student, even if they said something wrong. I try not to do that even in my classes. So, you know, having courage to come forward, unless a student is truly doesn't take that advice and continues on the same path, that would be a different discussion. Does that make sense to you? I hope it does. But sometimes it's just a personality issue. Sometimes you don't communicate well together. That just means that student probably needs to seek a mentoring relationship with someone else. Colleagues?
You said it, and I'm just looking at the time. It's past 1, but you had great advice there. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Good question, Adela. It doesn't always fit. It doesn't always fit. But trying is important, and you don't have to be close to every professor, but you can respect them, they can get to know you, and there's sometimes social capital that comes into just the knowing that goes well beyond a letter of recommendation, right? It's just them having a good impression of you and knowing you're a serious student and knowing something about you personally. So all of that will benefit you. Yeah. So I hope this was meaningful for you all, and I hope it was positive. It was truly meant to be a positive about encouraging you, about building those relationships and making the most of your opportunities to be with amazing researchers. I cannot say enough. I have the best colleagues in UPS. I am so lucky, and I'm very, very grateful to our panel today. I have the utmost respect for Dr. Kim, Dr. Saberwal, and Dr. Scotch, which is why I asked specifically the 3 of them to be on this panel that I was envisioning for our UPS students. I could not have better role models sitting at the table, and know that we are wishing you all greatness this semester. The challenges with COVID are a hurdle, but they are not an excuse not to do the hard things that you need to do to make the most of your time at UTD. So I need you to all think about, as you come off this call, what are you going to do to build the relationships that are going to be meaningful for you, not just for a letter, but for your own personal development and your life goals, and just making the most of your time here at UT Dallas, and specifically within EPS. And I think you'll find if you prepare and if you put your best foot forward and you make the effort, that your professors will invest back in you. So we're wishing you well.
Good luck. Thank you all.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having us on the panel. Thank you, Dr. Boots. Bye. Good luck, everyone. Bye.
All right, everyone, have a great day. And students, thanks for coming today.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.